The sound of
This
pen
feels like a
scratching
dream.
paper should not have been
A dream
so
I
loud.
never want to wake from.
But in the silence
Me
of the
neither.
Whitfield Estate Library, Emma
The
Sinclair
terms are
heard
clear.
every stroke,
Sign it.
every
I need a
betrayal,
moment to
every
review.
lie written
Take
into
your
legal
time.
binding. She had come early to surprise Marcus before the National Security Gala, 20 minutes early, just enough time to slip into his father's library, maybe steal a quiet moment before the circus of Washington elite began their political theater for the evening. Instead, she stood frozen behind the velvet curtain that separated the reading alcove from the main library floor. Her emerald gown, the one she had saved 3 months of salary to afford, suddenly felt too tight, too expensive, too hopeful. Marcus sat across from Richard Whitfield and Preston Sterling. Between them lay a contract. Emma could see it from her hidden position, could see the Whitfield Enterprises letterhead, could see the bold print of legal terminology that she herself had probably drafted in some form during her 3 years of invisible labor. But this contract was not hers. This contract had Victoria Sterling's name on it, and a dollar amount that made Emma's chest constrict: $50 million. The merger is complete, Mr. Whitfield. Preston Sterling's voice carried the smooth confidence of old money. The kind of money that never worried, never struggled, never had to prove its worth. $50 million to clear your debts. In exchange, you marry my daughter, someone with actual capital, actual bloodline. Emma waited for Marcus to refuse, waited for him to remember their 3 years together. The late nights she had spent restructuring his family's failing trade agreements. The congressional hearings where she had fed him every answer through carefully coded notes. The treaty negotiations where she had done all the intellectual heavy lifting while he smiled for cameras and took credit, waited for him to fight for her. Marcus signed without hesitation. The pen moved across the paper in one smooth, practiced motion, like he had been rehearsing, like this decision had been made long before Emma ever walked into this library. What about Emma? Marcus asked the question, but his voice was flat, obligated, the tone of a man checking a box on a list of inconvenient tasks. Victoria Sterling laughed. The sound was cold and sharp, like crystal shattering on marble. Give her some money, Victoria said. 200,000. Women like her are resilient. She'll land on her feet. She was never going to fit into our world anyway. Women like her. The words landed like a physical blow. Emma's hand went to the curtain, gripping the velvet so hard her knuckles went white. Women like her, commoners. The ones who did the work while nobility took the credit. The ones who were useful until they were not. The ones whose intelligence was praised in private and dismissed in public. Emma's throat tightened, but she did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears were a luxury she could not afford. Not when you were the daughter of a high school teacher and a seamstress. Not when you had clawed your way through Yale Law on scholarship and shame. Not when you had spent 3 years building a man's empire, only to be erased in red ink. She turned to leave, quietly, carefully, before they saw her, before she shattered completely. She made it 3 steps before colliding with a solid chest. Strong hands steadied her, caught her before she stumbled backward, before she made a sound that would have given away her presence. Emma looked up into the face of a man she had never seen at any Washington function. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver streaking through dark hair that was pulled back from a face weathered by something more serious than political stress. He wore a simple dark suit, well-tailored, but deliberately understated. No flash, no designer labels screaming wealth. But there was something in the way he carried himself that suggested authority. Command, the kind of presence that did not need announcement. His eyes were steel gray, cold, assessing. The eyes of someone who saw everything and revealed nothing. Leaving so soon, Miss Sinclair. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous in its calm. Emma's breath caught. He knew her name. How did he know her name? Who are you? She whispered. Dominic Pierce. He glanced past her toward the library door, where the sound of Marcus's signature still echoed in her memory. Then back to her. A slight knowing smile crossed his lips. A disgraced intelligence officer with nothing left to lose. He paused, and in that pause, Emma felt the weight of calculation, of chess pieces moving on a board she could not yet see. And it appears we both have reasons to make the Whitfield family regret their choices. He extended a gloved hand. I have a proposition for you. What Emma did not know, what she could not possibly have known, in that moment of shock and rage and heartbreak, was that Dominic Pierce was not just some failed government bureaucrat nursing wounded pride. He was the man who had decided which senators rose and which ones fell, which corporations thrived and which ones crumbled under the weight of their own corruption, which international treaties survived scrutiny and which ones died in committee. For 15 years, Dominic Pierce had been the director of national intelligence, the spider at the center of the web, the quiet voice in the president's ear that turned suspicion into evidence and evidence into action. And 5 years ago, in the fall of 2019, he had been publicly fired, dragged before Congress, humiliated on national television, stripped of his title and authority and reputation, all according to plan. The disgrace had been theater. Carefully orchestrated political theater designed to make certain people comfortable, to make enemies lower their guard, to transform the most dangerous man in Washington into a harmless has-been that nobody watched anymore. But Dominic Pierce was still watching, and he had been watching Emma Sinclair for 2 years. Emma made her choice in the span of a heartbeat. She took Dominic Pierce's gloved hand, felt the strength in his grip, and wondered if she was making a deal with the devil or finding an unlikely angel. "What kind of proposition?" she asked. "Not here." Dominic released her hand and stepped back, creating proper distance, professional distance. "The National Security Gala begins in 2 hours. Will you be attending?" "I was supposed to." Emma's voice cracked slightly on the past tense. "As Marcus's fiancé." "Then attend as yourself." Dominic pulled a card from his jacket pocket, heavy cardstock with nothing but an address embossed in simple black lettering. "Meet me at the East Terrace, midnight. If you want to stop this, I can help. If you don't, I understand." He turned to leave, then paused. "Either way, Miss Sinclair, you deserve better than being a footnote in someone else's story." He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Emma standing alone with a business card and a choice that would change everything. The Kennedy Center glittered like a jewel box spilled across the Potomac. Emma arrived alone, her emerald gown now feeling less like hope and more like armor. She had gone home first, changed nothing about her appearance except her expression, wiped away the tears that had finally come in the privacy of her small Georgetown apartment, reapplied her makeup with the precision of someone preparing for battle. This was supposed to be her debut. The night Marcus would present her to Washington's inner circle as his official fiancé. The night she would finally step out of the shadows and into recognition. Instead, she walked through the grand entrance alone. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles reflected in crystal chandeliers. Masked guests swirled across marble floors in silk and velvet, worth more than most Americans earned in a year. Emma recognized the faces behind the masks, had memorized them all during her 3 years as Marcus's ghostwriter. Senator Ashford, Congressman Morrison, Justice Whitmore. The entire architecture of American power gathered in one room to see and be seen, to make deals that would never appear in official records, to trade influence like currency. She had written half the speeches these people applauded, drafted the treaties they signed, negotiated the compromises they celebrated, and not one of them knew her name. Emma moved through the crowd like a ghost accepting champagne from a passing server. The crystal flute felt fragile in her hand, delicate enough to shatter, like trust, like promises, like 3 years of her life reduced to a severance payment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies' voice rang out over the music, cutting through conversation like a blade. "May I present Marcus Whitfield of Whitfield Enterprises and his betrothed, Victoria Sterling of Sterling Global Holdings." The crowd parted like water. Marcus entered with Victoria on his arm, and despite everything, despite the betrayal and the rage and the grief Emma's breath still caught, Victoria wore gold, a gown so encrusted with jewels it looked like she had bathed in sunlight and emerged dripping wealth. Her tiara caught the candlelight, throwing rainbow prisms across the floor. She was beautiful in the way expensive things are beautiful, polished, perfect, cold. Marcus wore Whitfield colors, deep blue with silver trim. He looked exactly as he always had, handsome in a soft way, like a man who had never fought for anything in his life because he had never had to. They descended the grand staircase together, and Washington applauded. Emma did not move. She stood near a marble column half hidden by shadow and watched the man she had loved accept congratulations for a marriage that had erased her from existence. Marcus, well done." Senator Ashford clapped him on the shoulder with the familiarity of old political allies. "The Sterling alliance will do wonders for Whitfield's standing." Indeed, Justice Whitmore's fan fluttered with practiced elegance. "And Victoria is so accomplished. I hear she studied economics at Wharton." Studied, Emma thought bitterly, with family money and connections that guaranteed success before she ever opened a textbook. Emma had earned her Yale degree through scholarships and sleepless nights, working 3 jobs to pay for books that Whitfield money could have bought without thought. "Marcus has always had such excellent judgment," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the ballroom with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. She pressed closer to him, possessive, claiming, "He knows the value of proper breeding and connections." Proper breeding. The words landed like a slap across Emma's face. Of course there was that unfortunate situation with his previous arrangement. Justice Whitmore whispered not quietly enough, the whisper that was meant to be heard. But really, what was he thinking, the commoner with no family name? No dowry, it was never going to work. "I heard she was quite clever, though," Senator Ashford said, and Emma could hear the dismissal already forming in his tone. "Managed his correspondence. Helped with negotiations." "Cleverness is not breeding," Victoria interjected smoothly, her smile sharp as glass. "Any secretary can file papers. It takes real substance to lead a house, real education, real pedigree." Secretary, 3 years of strategic genius reduced to filing papers. Emma's fingers tightened on her champagne flute until she could feel the crystal threatening to crack under the pressure. She should leave, walk out with whatever dignity she had left. But her feet would not move. Some part of her needed to witness this, needed to see exactly how thoroughly she had been erased from the narrative of her own life. The music shifted, a waltz beginning slow and elegant. Marcus led Victoria to the center of the floor. They moved together with practiced ease, and Washington watched approvingly. This was the kind of couple they understood, the kind that made sense in their world of bloodlines and bank accounts and calculated alliances. "Excuse me, miss." Emma turned. A server stood beside her, silver tray in hand. On it lay a single white rose and a folded note. "From the gentleman by the East Terrace," the server said quietly, then disappeared into the crowd before Emma could ask questions. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was strong, angular, deliberate, the writing of someone who chose every word with purpose. "They are about to make the announcement official. If you want to stop this, meet me in the East Gardens. If you do not, I understand. Either way, you deserve better than being a footnote in someone else's story." Deep Emma looked toward the East Terrace. Through the glass doors, she could see a figure standing in shadow. Military posture, dark suit. Dominic Pierce, the disgraced intelligence officer who had appeared in her life like something out of a fever dream. "Attention, please." The master of ceremonies struck his staff against the marble floor 3 times. Sharp, commanding. The music stopped. The dancing ceased. Every masked face turned toward the dais where Marcus and Victoria now stood with both their families. Richard Whitfield stepped forward, his silver hair gleaming in candlelight, his smile the practiced smile of a man who had made fortunes on the backs of others. "It is my honor," Richard announced, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older power, "to formally declare the engagement between my son Marcus and Victoria Sterling. The union of Whitfield Enterprises and Sterling Global Holdings will strengthen both our families and bring prosperity to all our ventures." The room applauded, champagne glasses raised in toast. The deal was done. However, Richard continued, and something in his tone made the applause die away, made the room fall silent with anticipation. "There is the matter of my son's previous arrangement to address." Emma's heart stopped. Marcus was briefly engaged to a Miss Emma Sinclair, a commoner who served as an assistant in our organization. That engagement is hereby formally dissolved, effective immediately. The crowd murmured. Several heads turned, searching for the source of scandal in their midst. Someone spotted Emma by her column. "Miss Sinclair." Richard's voice found her across the ballroom, carrying like judgment. "Step forward, please." Every eye in the room fixed on her. Emma's legs moved automatically, some part of her brain that still functioned on autopilot carrying her toward humiliation even as her mind screamed to run. The crowd parted before her, nobles and politicians and power brokers stepping aside as if she carried something contagious, as if poverty and ambition could spread through proximity. She climbed the steps to the dais, stood before Richard Whitfield and his son, and the woman who had bought her life with $50 million. Her hands were steady, her face was calm. Inside, she was burning. "Miss Sinclair," Richard said, his voice formal and final and utterly devoid of humanity. "You have served Whitfield Enterprises adequately in your capacity. However, you lack the lineage, the connections, and frankly the substance required to elevate our family name. My son's engagement to you was a youthful mistake, one we are correcting tonight." The words echoed through the silent ballroom like stones thrown in still water, rippling outward, touching everyone, marking her. "Do you have anything to say?" Richard asked, and there was challenge in his eyes, daring her to argue, to make a scene, to prove she was exactly as low class as they had always believed. Emma looked at Marcus. His face was carefully blank, mask-like. 3 years. 3 years of loving him, building him up, making him look competent to these people who now watched her humiliation like entertainment, and he could not even meet her eyes. She smiled. It felt like ice forming on her lips. "I have nothing to say to you," she said quietly, her voice carrying in the silence with perfect clarity. Then she turned to the crowd, to all of Washington's elite, to every face that had dismissed her, ignored her, used her brilliance while denying her credit. "To any of you." The room held its breath. "You think breeding and bloodlines make you better?" Emma continued, her voice level and calm and deadly. "You think golden titles give you worth. But I have seen your contracts, read your correspondence, fixed your mistakes. Half of you cannot write a coherent policy brief without help from people like me. People you call secretaries and assistants and footnotes." Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Miss Sinclair," Richard warned, his voice sharp with anger barely controlled. "I am not finished." Emma's voice cut through his warning like steel. "You look down on commoners, but we are the ones keeping your world running. We are the architects and strategists, the real minds behind your genius deals. We write your speeches and negotiate your treaties and make you look intelligent to a public that would see through you in seconds if we were not there to prop you up." She turned to Marcus, finally met his eyes. "And you specifically, you are the worst of them all because you knew my value. You used it. You built your entire career on my work. And then you sold me the moment someone offered you a better price." Marcus's face flushed red behind his mask. "You are being dramatic. This is business." "No," Emma said softly. "This is cowardice." She pulled the promise ring from her finger. Not the engagement ring, she had already thrown that in the Potomac on her way here, but the smaller ring from their first anniversary. The one Marcus had given her with tears in his eyes, swearing she was the only person who truly understood him. Emma dropped it on the marble floor. It bounced once, twice, the sound clear and final in the silent ballroom. Then she walked away. The crowd parted faster this time, politicians practically jumping out of her path. She heard the whispers starting, the scandalized murmurs, the delicious shock of someone from the bottom tier daring to speak truth to power. She did not care. Her face stayed composed, her back straight, but inside she was screaming. She pushed through the glass doors onto the East Terrace. The night air hit her like cold water, sharp and clarifying. September in Washington, cool enough to remind her she was still alive, still breathing, still standing. The garden stretched before her, manicured hedges and fountain sculptures, beautiful and artificial, like everything else in this city. That was magnificent. Dominic Pierce stepped from the shadows. Up close in the garden lights, Emma could see him more clearly. Older than she had first thought. Mid-40s, but age had only refined his features into something striking. His hair was dark with silver, threading through it. His face was all sharp angles and steady eyes. The face of someone who had seen the worst of humanity and chosen to keep fighting anyway. The suit he wore was simple, dark wool with plain buttons, but something about the way he wore it suggested authority. Command, the bearing of a military officer who had earned respect through competence rather than birthright. "I just destroyed my reputation in front of the entire Washington establishment," Emma said, and now that no one else could hear, her voice shook, trembled with adrenaline and fear, and the terrible realization of what she had just done. "You spoke truth to power," Dominic said, moving closer. His voice was quiet, steady, an anchor in the storm. "That is rare, and far more valuable than reputation. Easy for you to say. You are not the one they will be gossiping about tomorrow." "Am I not?" His smile was slight, knowing. "I am the disgraced intelligence officer who was stripped of his position for refusing to execute political enemies without evidence. I have been the subject of Washington gossip for 5 years. I can assure you Miss Sinclair's scandal is survivable. Compromise is not." Emma studied him in the moonlight, trying to read the angles of his face, the calculation in his eyes. "Why were you really stripped of your position?" she asked. "Because I told the president that assassinating senators based on suspicion rather than evidence would make him a tyrant." Dominic's tone stayed neutral, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather rather than treason. He disagreed, publicly, loudly, in front of the entire National Security Council. Emma's breath caught. She remembered the scandal 5 years ago, the high-ranking intelligence officer dressed down by the president himself, stripped of title and position and security clearance. Washington had talked about nothing else for months. You are the Iron Shadow, she whispered. Was, Dominic corrected gently. Now I am just a man with an estate in Virginia, some land, and a reputation that makes politicians nervous. Then why are you here at a gala full of those same politicians? Because the president sends me an invitation every year. Dominic's eyes glinted with something dangerous. Something that suggested the Iron Shadow was not quite as retired as Washington believed. He does that. Reminds me I am still breathing at his pleasure. Keeps me visible enough that enemies remember I exist. Invisible enough that they forget to watch me. Sounds like you and I have something in common, Emma said, being reminded of our place. The difference, Dominic said quietly, stepping closer, is that I stopped accepting the place they assigned me. The question is, will you? Emma looked back through the glass doors. Inside, the gala had resumed. Marcus and Victoria were dancing again, the scandal of Emma's outburst already fading into entertainment. By tomorrow, it would be a funny story. The commoner who thought she belonged, the secretary who forgot her station. By next week, she would be forgotten entirely. Your proposition, Emma said, turning back to Dominic. What exactly are you offering? Dominic reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Heavy paper, legal weight, the kind of contract that changed lives. 1 year of marriage, he said simply. At the end of that year, you walk away with $500,000. Enough to start over anywhere you choose. A title that will open doors your talent deserves. And the satisfaction of watching Marcus Whitfield realize exactly what he lost. Emma stared at the contract in his hand. Why would you do this? You do not know me. I know enough. Dominic's gaze was steady, unwavering. The eyes of someone who had made a decision and would not be swayed. I know you are brilliant. I have read the treaties you ghost-wrote for Whitfield Enterprises. The Riverlands Accords alone would have taken most diplomats 6 months. You finished it in 3 weeks. He paused and Emma felt the weight of being truly seen for the first time in 3 years. I know you are brave. I watched you face down the entire Washington establishment tonight. And I know you are exactly the kind of person who should have power in this country. Intelligence combined with integrity. Rare. Valuable. And what do you get out of it? Emma asked, because there was always a price. Always an angle. Nothing in Washington was free. The president has decided I need a wife. Dominic's jaw tightened, the first sign of real emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. If I do not marry by year's end, he will seize my estate and assets under some obscure national security provision. He thinks isolation will make me reconsider my principles. Will it? No. Simple. Final. But I need someone who can survive what comes next. Someone strong enough to stand beside me when Washington tries to break us down. Emma looked at the contract, at the clean legal language that promised her freedom, financial security, a new identity. This is insane, she said. We just met. True, Dominic held out the document. But you stood in front of the entire Washington elite and told them they were wrong about you. That takes either courage or desperation. He met her eyes, and in that gaze, Emma saw recognition, understanding, the kinship of two people who had been used and discarded by the same system. Which is it? He asked. Both, Emma admitted. She took the contract. It was surprisingly simple. 1 year of marriage. At the end, she would receive $500,000. She would retain the title of Mrs. Pierce for life. She would have full access to Dominic's resources during their union. No mention of love. No promises of romance. Just a clean business transaction between two people who needed each other for survival. This is generous, she said, slowly reading through the clauses with the trained eye of someone who had drafted hundreds of contracts. It is fair. Dominic produced a pen from his pocket. Heavy, expensive. The kind of pen that signed documents that mattered. I am not buying you, Miss Sinclair. I am offering you an alliance. You help me keep my estate. I help you reclaim your dignity. We both win. Emma's hand hovered over the signature line. One signature, one decision. One choice that would change the trajectory of her entire life. And if I sign this, what happens next? She asked. We make an entrance, Dominic said, and now there was something almost like warmth in his voice. We go back into that ballroom, and I introduce you as my wife. Then we watch Marcus Whitfield choke on his champagne. Despite everything, Emma laughed. It felt sharp and bitter, but real. The first genuine emotion she had allowed herself since discovering Marcus's betrayal. You really do not like these people, do you? She asked. I despise them, Dominic said simply. They are parasites wearing designer suits. But I understand them, and I know how to beat them at their own game. Emma looked at the contract again. $500,000, a title that would let her travel anywhere, work anywhere, be taken seriously anywhere. It was more than she had ever hoped to have, more than a girl from a seamstress and a teacher had any right to dream. And the look on Marcus's face when she walked back in married to someone else, that was worth more than gold. She signed her name, Emma Sinclair, clear and bold across the signature line. Dominic witnessed it, his signature strong and sure beneath hers. Then he folded the document and tucked it back into his jacket. "Welcome to the Pierce family, Mrs. Pierce," he said, and the title hit her like lightning. Mrs. Pierce, Emma Sinclair Pierce, daughter of a seamstress and a teacher, now the wife of one of the most dangerous men in Washington. "This does not feel real," she whispered. "It will." Dominic offered his arm. "Shall we make our announcement?" They walked back into the Kennedy Center together. The gala was in full swing, politicians dancing and drinking the scandal of earlier already forgotten in favor of newer gossip and fresher intrigue. Emma spotted Marcus at the center of a group of admirers, Victoria at his side. Both of them laughing at something Senator Ashford said. They looked happy, victorious, like people who had won. The master of ceremonies saw Dominic first. His eyes widened, recognition and shock warring across his professional features. He struck his staff against the floor once, twice, trying to get attention over the music. The band played on, conversation continued. He struck harder. "My lords and ladies," he called out, his voice climbing to reach over the noise. "His Excellency Mr. Dominic Pierce." The music died instantly. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. The ballroom fell into shocked silence as Dominic walked forward with Emma on his arm. The crowd parted before them like the Red Sea, senators and congressmen and Supreme Court justices pressing back against walls to give them space. Emma felt their stares, heard the gasps of recognition, the whispers spreading like wildfire. The disgraced intelligence officer had returned, and he was not alone. They climbed the dais where Marcus and Victoria stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to lips, victory smiles turning to ash. "Mr. Pierce," Richard Whitfield said carefully, his political instincts forcing him to maintain composure, even as calculation flickered behind his eyes. "We were not expecting you." "I was invited," Dominic said mildly, his voice carrying in the silence, "by the president himself. He does enjoy reminding me of my place." "Yes, well." Richard's eyes flicked to Emma, and she saw the moment he recognized her, saw the shock, the confusion, the beginning of understanding that something had shifted in the careful balance of power he thought he controlled. "I see you brought a guest." "Not a guest," Dominic said, and his hand tightened slightly on Emma's arm. "Not possessive, supportive, the touch of a partner rather than an owner. My wife, Mrs. Emma Sinclair Pierce." The ballroom erupted. Nobles gasped. Politicians choked on champagne. Several women's fans snapped open to hide shocked expressions. Emma heard someone say impossible, and someone else laugh with the sharp edge of hysteria. Marcus's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the cavernous space. "That is impossible," Victoria said, her voice sharp with something that might have been fear. "We just dissolved her engagement. She cannot possibly, sorry, they cannot possibly what?" Dominic's tone stayed pleasant, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes, the iron shadow showing through the civilized veneer. "Cannot possibly have married above her station, cannot possibly be standing here as my equal. Which part troubles you, Miss Sterling?" Victoria's face flushed red. "I only meant the timing, the paperwork." "Was filed this afternoon," Dominic said smoothly. "Witnessed and sealed by a federal judge. All perfectly legal. The president's requirement that I marry has been satisfied." He looked directly at Marcus, and Emma felt the air temperature drop several degrees. "Congratulations on your engagement, Mr. Whitfield. Miss Sterling is lovely, though I must say I believe I secured the better end of this evening's marital arrangements." Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. Emma found her voice. "Hello, Marcus." 2 words, simple, calm, but they landed like bombs. "Emma." He finally managed to speak her name, coming out strangled. "What are you doing?" "Getting married, apparently." She smiled, the same ice-cold smile from earlier. "Just like you, though I have to say, my husband actually chose me. Did not need a $50 million incentive." Richard Whitfield stepped forward, his face mottled with anger, barely controlled by decades of political training. "This is highly irregular, Mr. Pierce. Surely you cannot be serious. This woman has no training, no family." No, Dominic cut him off, and now the iron shadow was fully present. The voice that had commanded intelligence operations across 6 continents. The voice that had made senators weep and foreign agents confess. She has a mind sharper than anyone in this room. She has strategic brilliance you people have been exploiting for years. And now she has my name, my resources, and my full support. He paused, letting the words sink in. I suggest you remember that. The threat was quiet but unmistakable. Richard Whitfield went pale. Now then, Dominic turned to address the room, his voice returning to pleasant formality. I believe the evening's festivities should continue. My wife and I will take our leave. We have a household to prepare. He guided Emma toward the exit. The crowd parted silently this time. Senators and judges and power brokers pressing back against walls, giving them space, showing respect or fear or some combination of both. Emma kept her head high, her hands steady on Dominic's arm. Even though her heart raced like a wild bird in her chest, even though she could feel the weight of every eye following their exit. They reached the grand entrance before Marcus caught up. Emma, wait. He grabbed her arm, pulled her around with enough force that Dominic tensed his hand, moving to intercept before Emma signaled him to stop. She could handle this. You cannot do this, Marcus said, desperation cracking through his usual polished composure. This is insane. You are marrying him for revenge. I am marrying him for a future, Emma said quietly. Something you just took from me. I had no choice. My family needed. Do not. She yanked her arm free from his grip. Do not pretend this was sacrifice. You signed me away for money. You did not even hesitate. Emma, please. You traded me like property, Marcus. Like a stock you were ready to sell. And now you are surprised that someone else saw my value? That someone else wanted me for more than what I could do for them in the shadows. She stepped back, creating distance, reclaiming space. I hope Victoria's money makes you happy, because you will need it when you realize she cannot think her way out of a simple negotiation. When your empire starts crumbling without me there to hold it together. Emma turned and walked away. Dominic fell into step beside her, his presence solid and steady. Marcus did not follow. The car waiting outside was understated. Black sedan with tinted windows. Government issue, Emma realized, or designed to look like it. The driver touched his cap in greeting, his expression carefully neutral, professional, the face of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Pierce Estates, sir, he asked. Yes, Thomas. Dominic handed Emma into the back seat before following. The door closed, sealing them into leather-scented darkness. The car pulled away from the Kennedy Center, away from the lights and the scandal and the life Emma had built on quicksand. She watched through the window as Washington disappeared behind them, the monuments glowing white in the distance, the Potomac reflecting city lights like scattered stars. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I have ever done, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Often the same thing, Dominic replied. He was watching her with those steady, assessing eyes. How are you feeling? Terrified, Emma admitted. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind exhaustion and the terrible clarity of consequence. I just married a stranger. I have no idea what happens next. Next, you meet the household staff. They are loyal, disciplined, and utterly discreet. Dominic's voice was calm, practical. The voice of someone who had managed crises far worse than an impulsive marriage. Then you sleep in a real bed. Tomorrow we discuss how to manage Washington's response to tonight's theater. He paused. And somewhere in there, we figure out how to live in the same house for a year without killing each other. Despite everything, Emma laughed. It came out raw and genuine. The laugh of someone who had jumped off a cliff and was only now realizing they might actually have a parachute. You are very practical, she said. I was a soldier before I was a spy master, Dominic said. Practicality kept me alive. Emotion got people killed. They rode in silence for a while, the city giving way to Virginia countryside, rolling hills dark under September stars. Emma leaned against the window, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She could feel Dominic's presence beside her. Solid, real. A stranger she had bound herself to for 1 year. Dominic, she said quietly. Yes. Thank you for tonight, for the offer, for seeing something in me worth defending. I did not defend you, Dominic said, and there was something almost gentle in his voice. You defended yourself. I just gave you a platform. He looked at her seriously in the darkness. But you are welcome. And Emma, they were wrong about you. All of them. You have more substance than that entire ballroom combined. Emma's throat tightened. She turned back to the window before he could see the tears finally forming. The ones she had held back through betrayal and humiliation and rage. The ones that came now in the safety of darkness and leather seats, in the presence of someone who had seen her value without needing proof. The car rolled on through the night, carrying her toward a life she could not possibly have imagined that morning. She was married. She was Mrs. Emma Sinclair Pierce. She was free. And Marcus Whitfield could choke on it. Morning came through windows Emma had forgotten to curtain. She woke to sunlight streaming across her face, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. High ceilings, dark wood, the scent of old books and beeswax polish. Then memory crashed back. Marcus, Victoria, Dominic. The contract signed in moonlight and desperation. Pierce Estate had appeared like a fortress the night before. Federal architecture from the 1800s, weathered gray stone and tall windows. But it was the silence that had struck Emma most. No music, no servants bustling, just order maintained by invisible hands. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the housekeeper, had shown her to chambers in the east wing. Dominic occupied the west. Separate lives. The connecting door between their rooms locked. A business arrangement. Nothing more. Emma found a note on her bedside table written in Dominic's precise hand. Breakfast at 7 if you are interested. Private kitchen, ground floor, west wing. Follow the scent of coffee. D.P. She checked the clock. 6:45. The house was easier to navigate in daylight. She followed corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced Pierce ancestors, descended the grand staircase, and let her nose guide her west. The scent of coffee led her to a door tucked behind the formal dining room. She pushed it open and stopped. Dominic stood at a commercial-grade stove cooking. He wore shirt sleeves despite the early hour, his dark hair pulled back completely at ease in this space that was clearly his sanctuary. "You cook," Emma said. He glanced over his shoulder. "I survived 30 years in military and intelligence operations. Field kitchens taught me more than most culinary schools." He gestured to a small table near windows overlooking herb gardens. "Sit, this is almost ready." Within minutes, he had plated eggs, toast, and rosemary potatoes. Simple food prepared with precision. "The staff does not come here," he explained, sitting across from her. "This is mine. I use it when I need to think." Emma tasted the eggs. "Perfect. Tell me about your family. Mrs. Hayes mentioned you have been estranged 30 years. Dominic's fork paused. He set it down with deliberate care. 30 years, since I refused to help them destroy 3 innocent families for profit. He told her then about his father's plot to frame senators for treason, about exposing the conspiracy to the previous president, about testifying against his own family and being disowned for choosing justice over loyalty. "Richard Whitfield is my cousin," he finished, "which is how I knew about you 2 years before we met. Family networks talk even when pretending certain members do not exist." Emma reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. "I am sorry, but do not be." His fingers curled around hers. "That decision cost me family. But it saved innocence. That matters more." They sat like that, hands linked, 2 damaged people finding unexpected comfort in shared understanding. It was not romance, but it was connection, real and raw and honest. "I need to show you something," Dominic said after breakfast the next morning. He led Emma through the west wing to a door she had not noticed before. Beyond his bedroom, beyond the ordinary. He pushed it open. The room stole her breath. Wall-to-wall maps covered in pins and thread, filing cabinets labeled with political families, intelligence reports marked classified, a central table buried under evidence of corruption spanning decades. This was not a study. This was an operations center. "Welcome to the heart of my work," Dominic said quietly. Emma moved to the nearest map, the eastern seaboard marked with colored pins, red for scandal, blue for financial instability, green for loyalty, yellow for unknowns. The Whitfield family red and blue, notes in Dominic's hand, primary strategist Emma Sinclair, without her collapse within 18 months. "You have been watching me," Emma breathed, "for 2 years, documenting your brilliance, waiting for the inevitable." He pulled a thick file from the cabinets. Emma's work, every treaty, every negotiation, all credited to Marcus but cataloged here with her signature, highlighted in yellow. "This is what you are worth," Dominic said. This is what he threw away. Emma stared at the evidence, at proof she had mattered, that someone had been paying attention even when she felt invisible. "Why show me this now?" she asked. "Because you are not just my contract wife. You are my partner in this work, and partners do not keep secrets." Over the next hour, Dominic explained how he still ran intelligence networks despite his public disgrace, how he documented corruption to give powerful people choices, reform quietly or face exposure, how he protected both justice and innocence by operating in shadows. This is not heroic, he finished. It is morally gray. I blackmail to prevent worse outcomes. I hide information from the president to stop overreaction. I manipulate to maintain stability. He looked at her seriously. If you want the annulment, I understand. You will still get your settlement. Emma studied the maps, the careful documentation. One man trying to hold a nation together through stubborn determination. I am not leaving, she said. I want to help. Then we are partners. Dominic extended his hand. Equals in this. Emma shook it. Partners. The training began immediately. Dominic taught Emma his filing system, how to read intelligence reports, how to connect disparate threads into coherent narratives of corruption. She was brilliant at it, seeing patterns he had missed, drawing conclusions that made him reassess cases he thought closed. You are a natural strategist, he said one afternoon, as she connected 3 separate corruption schemes into one coordinated conspiracy. I had good practice, Emma replied. 3 years cleaning up Marcus's messes taught me to see what people try to hide. On the 5th day, Dominic introduced her to his network. The first operative arrived at 10 a.m., codename Cardinal, a Senate staffer who provided intelligence on legislative corruption. Mrs. Pierce, Cardinal nodded respectfully. Dominic speaks highly of your analytical skills. Emma spent an hour debriefing Cardinal on suspicious spending patterns in the Armed Services Committee. By the end, she had identified 2 senators likely taking kickbacks from defense contractors. Impressive, Cardinal said as he left. We need more minds like yours. The second operative, Sparrow, came at 2 p.m., a junior attorney in the Justice Department. I have information on Sterling Global Holdings, Sparrow said, spreading documents across the war room table. Victoria Sterling is expanding beyond money laundering. They are moving into pharmaceutical trafficking, opioids from overseas distributed through legitimate medical supply chains. Emma leaned forward, studying shipping manifests and bank transfers. This is not just trafficking, she said slowly. This is a complete parallel supply chain. The coordination required means political protection at high levels. She pulled 3 documents, laid them side by side. These shipping dates align with congressional recess periods, and these ports correspond to districts of senators on the Commerce Committee. She looked up at Dominic. Someone in Congress is providing cover. Who? Dominic asked, though Emma sensed he was testing her. She cross-referenced dates with congressional schedule. Jules felt her stomach drop. Senator Ashford. Dominic's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment. I gave him a choice 3 years ago, he said quietly. Stop embezzling from education funds or face prosecution. He chose to stop. I thought I had saved him. Perhaps he was coerced, Emma suggested. Before we act, we should understand why. Dominic smiled slightly. Spoken like someone who understands nuance. He turned to Sparrow. Investigate Ashford's family. Check for leverage. Blackmail. Anything that explains this choice. After Sparrow left, Dominic looked at Emma with something like pride. You handled that well. Most operatives would have demanded immediate action. Justice without understanding is just revenge, Emma said. You taught me that. The invitation arrived by courier. Heavy cardstock. White House seal. President Thornton requests your presence at the National Leadership Summit. November 15th, 2024. Black tie. Emma held it, understanding immediately. He knows we are working together, she said. Dominic nodded. I briefed him last week, told him I had recruited you as partner. He was impressed by your sterling analysis. And the summit. He is creating a position, special counsel for government integrity, giving it legal authority to investigate corruption, making it public so Congress cannot quietly eliminate it. Dominic paused. He wants to elevate both of us, make us the official face of anti-corruption enforcement. Emma felt excitement and fear warring in her chest. That makes us targets. Yes, every corrupt politician we have files on will know exactly who to blame. He met her eyes. If you want to stay in the shadows, I will tell Thornton you prefer background work. No, Emma's voice was firm. We are partners. We face this together. Something warm flickered across Dominic's face. I was hoping you would say that. Sparrow returned with devastating news. Senator Ashford was not being blackmailed. He had joined the Sterling conspiracy willingly. More than that, he was coordinating with 6 other political families to plan something at the summit. They are planning to force President Thornton's resignation, Sparrow said, spreading intercepted communications across the table. Vote of no confidence. Legal on the surface. Coup in reality. Emma read the messages, her analytical mind parsing strategy. Summit will be perfect opportunity. Both targets present. 7 families confirmed. They think removing Thornton stops the anti-corruption work, she said. We need to show them it does not. She stood moved to the windows overlooking Pierce Estate grounds. The special counsel position you are planning. Make it independent of the presidency. Give it constitutional authority. Show them that even if they remove Thornton, we continue the work. Dominic stared at her. You are suggesting we create an independent branch of government. I am suggesting we make corruption politically suicide, Emma replied. They think removing one man stops the threat. Prove them wrong. President James Thornton was younger than Emma expected, perhaps 50 with genuine warmth in his eyes despite the weight of office. Mrs. Pierce, he shook her hand. Dominic tells me you have a strategic mind that sees what others miss. Emma and Dominic briefed him on the conspiracy. 7 families, 70 senators, 200 representatives, all coordinated to force resignation or impeachment. How do I fight this without tearing the country apart? Thornton asked. Emma explained her strategy. Create the special counsel position as independent authority. Elevate people to conspirators' fear. Make it clear that removing the president solves nothing. You are talking about a 4th branch of government, Thornton said slowly. I am talking about institutional resilience, Emma corrected. Justice that survives political interference. Thornton looked at Dominic. Can you build this? With her beside me, Dominic said, looking at Emma. Yes. Thornton made his decision in a heartbeat. Then that is what we do. The summit becomes our announcement. 5 days before the summit, Emma worked late in the war room drafting the legal framework for the special counsel position. Dominic found her at 2 a.m. still writing. You should sleep, he said gently. I should finish this, Emma replied, not looking up. If we are going to make the corruption argument stick, the evidence must be legally unassailable. Dominic read over her shoulder. This is brilliant. You connected patterns across 12 years of Sterling operations. Shown systematic corruption implicating their entire board. I learned from the best, Emma said. No. He turned her chair, made her look at him. You brought your own genius. I collect information. You weaponize it. That is why we work. Emma felt warmth spreading through her chest. Being seen, being valued. Dominic, she said quietly. Yes. This started as strategy, a contract to solve problems. But it has become something else for me. Something real. He was very still, his gray eyes searching hers. For me as well, he said. I thought I was too damaged, too isolated. But you, Emma, you see the shadows and choose to stand in them with me. I choose you, Emma said. Not the contract, you. He kissed her then, tender and real and full of everything they had been too careful to say. When they pulled apart, Emma was smiling. After the summit, she said, when this is over, I want to marry you again. Not for contracts. For us. Yes, Dominic said simply. I choose you too, every day. They held each other in the war room, surrounded by evidence and plans, 2 people who had found love in the least likely place. Tomorrow would bring battle. But tonight they had this certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The National Leadership Summit transformed the convention center into something approaching grandeur. 800 guests, every major political family, every corporate power player. Media broadcasting live to millions. Emma dressed in midnight blue silk that made her look like authority given form. The chain Thornton would place around her neck waited in a velvet box. She touched it once before leaving Pierce Estate. Nervous, Dominic asked. Terrified, Emma admitted, and ready. They arrived separately as planned, she in a car that screamed government official, he in his usual understated sedan. Meeting in the crowd with brief touch of hands. President Thornton took the stage at 8 p.m. exactly. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we gather tonight to honor service, but I want to speak about what service means, about integrity, and about the future we are building. He paused. For 15 years, one man has served this country in ways that cannot be publicly acknowledged, has made choices that saved lives while destroying his reputation, has stood between chaos and order. He looked at Dominic. Mr. Dominic Pierce, please join me. The room murmured as Dominic walked to the stage, speculation running wild. I am creating tonight a new position, Special Counsel for Government Integrity, independent authority to investigate corruption at all levels, reporting directly to the American people. Thornton placed a heavy gold chain around Dominic's neck, the presidential seal gleaming. I appoint Dominic Pierce as Special Counsel, with full power to pursue justice. Applause erupted, some genuine, some calculated, but Thornton raised his hand. However, one person cannot do this alone. Real change requires partnership. He scanned the crowd, found Emma. Mrs. Emma Sinclair Pierce, come forward. Emma's heart stopped. This was not the plan, but Dominic smiled from the stage, encouraging. She walked through silence, climbed steps, stood before the president as 800 people watched. Mrs. Pierce, you have proven your worth through years of uncredited service. Treaties that secured peace, negotiations that saved industries, strategic brilliance while others took credit. His voice carried across the vast space. I have reviewed your work. I believe you represent the future. Competence over pedigree, merit over connections. He placed a second chain around her neck, identical to Dominic's. Equal authority. I appoint you Deputy Special Counsel, co-authority with your husband. You speak with my voice. Emma's throat tightened. She looked out and saw Marcus, his face stricken, Victoria pale with fury. I present Special Counsel Dominic Pierce and Deputy Special Counsel Emma Pierce, Thornton announced. They have my full support and absolute authority. Standing ovation. Even those who feared had to acknowledge the political masterstroke. Emma took Dominic's hand, raised it high. Partners elevated to the highest authority. Below 7 families realized their coup had become impossible. Removing Thornton would not stop the investigation. It would create martyrs with power to destroy them. They had lost before beginning. The arrest happened during dinner service. FBI agents moved through the ballroom like surgical instruments. Precise, unstoppable. Senator Ashford, the lead agent's voice carried, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice. Ashford went white. This is outrageous. I demand evidence has been submitted to federal prosecutors, Dominic said from the stage, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. Your coordination with Sterling Global Holdings, pharmaceutical trafficking, political conspiracy. He pulled up images on the ballroom screens, shipping manifests, bank transfers, communications encrypted but decoded. You were given a second chance 3 years ago, Dominic continued. You chose to go deeper into corruption. That choice has consequences. 3 more arrests, representatives caught in the Sterling conspiracy, each one documented, each one read rights before 800 witnesses and millions watching live. Then Victoria Sterling. Miss Sterling, the FBI agent said formally, you are under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and sedition. Victoria's composure cracked. You cannot do this. My family? Your family's corruption has been documented for 5 years, Emma said, stepping forward. She held a tablet displaying evidence. Every illegal transaction, every bribe, every shipment of pharmaceuticals that destroyed American families while you profited. She turned to address the room. This is what the special counsel does. We hold power accountable. We protect the vulnerable. We ensure that no one, no matter how wealthy or connected, is above justice. Marcus was arrested last. Marcus Whitfield, fraud, plagiarism of government documents, conspiracy. He looked at Emma with something desperate in his eyes. Emma, please. I was trapped. Your father controlled you through financial abuse. Emma interrupted. I know. We investigated. She pulled up documents on the screens. Richard Whitfield's threats, Marcus's mother's medical care held hostage, the psychological manipulation spanning years. Coercion does not excuse your choices, Emma said quietly, but it provides context. The prosecutors will consider it. Something shifted in Marcus's face. Understanding, perhaps gratitude. The agents led him away. They returned home in the early morning hours, exhausted, triumphant, changed. Mrs. Hayes had left champagne and strawberries in Dominic's private kitchen, a rare break from her usual stern efficiency. She approves, Dominic said, smiling. Emma kicked off her heels, poured champagne. We did it. We actually did it. You did it, Dominic corrected. Your strategy, your analysis. I just provided the platform. Partners, Emma reminded him. We did this together. They touched glasses, drank, let the adrenaline finally drain away. I meant what I said, Emma said after a long silence. About marrying you again, for real this time. Dominic set down his glass. Then let us do it properly. Not a contract, a choice. Whenever you want, Emma smiled. 2 weeks. Time to plan something small, something ours. 2 weeks, Dominic agreed. He pulled her close, kissed her with the certainty of someone who had found home in another person. Tomorrow would bring media storms and political fallout, But tonight in this kitchen that smelled of rosemary and hope, they had this moment. This choice, this beginning. The chapel had not been used in 30 years. Mrs. Hayes spent a week cleaning it, polishing wood, hanging simple white flowers, creating beauty from abandonment. 50 guests attended. President Thornton, the loyal operatives from Dominic's network, a few honest politicians who had survived Washington's corruption. Emma's parents flew in from Connecticut. Her mother cried through the entire ceremony. Her father, the high school teacher who had instilled in Emma the value of education, looked at Dominic with the assessing gaze of a man determining whether someone was worthy of his daughter. "You see her," he said to Dominic before the ceremony. "Really see her. That is all I ever wanted for her." "She is the most remarkable person I have ever met," Dominic replied simply. "I will spend my life trying to be worthy of that." Emma walked down the aisle in simple cream silk. No veil, no artifice, just herself. Dominic waited at the altar in morning dress, his silver-streaked hair catching sunlight through stained glass. The minister was brief. They had written their own vows. "Emma," Dominic began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you appeared in my life when I had given up on connection, on partnership, on anything beyond duty. You reminded me that intelligence without compassion is cold, that power without purpose is empty, that fighting alone is sustainable, but fighting together is transcendent." He took her hands. "I choose you, not because I need you to keep my estate, but because you make me want to be better, to do better, to build something that outlasts us both." Emma's eyes shone with tears she did not try to hide. "Dominic," she said, "3 months ago I was invisible, a ghost writing someone else's story. You saw me when I was nothing. You valued me when I had nothing to offer but myself. You gave me not just opportunity but partnership, not just respect but love." She squeezed his hands. "I choose you every day, in shadows and light, in victory and failure, for as long as we both shall live." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands replacing the contract. "I pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. Dominic kissed Emma like he was breathing for the first time. The small crowd erupted in applause. Mrs. Hayes cried into her handkerchief. The honeymoon was 5 days in a private estate in the mountains. No staff, no schedule, just Emma and Dominic learning to be married people instead of strategic partners. The first morning, Dominic cooked breakfast while Emma read Wollstonecraft in front of the fireplace. "Listen to this," she said. "I do not wish women to have power over men, but over themselves." "You have both now," Dominic observed, bringing her coffee. "We have both," Emma corrected. "Power is only meaningful when shared." They spent afternoons hiking mountain trails, evenings cooking together in the estate's rustic kitchen, nights learning each other in ways that had nothing to do with intelligence or strategy. On the third night, Emma curled against Dominic's chest, firelight casting shadows across the bedroom. "I am happy," she said, almost surprised by the admission. "I did not think I would be, after everything with Marcus, but I am." "So am I," Dominic said, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "For 30 years, I thought happiness was sacrifice I made for duty. You proved me wrong." "We proved each other wrong," Emma said, "about what is possible when two broken people choose to build something together." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other, the future spreading before them, like the Virginia mountains, vast and challenging and beautiful. The special counsel office opened in a building near the Capitol. Sparrow became their deputy director. Cardinal headed congressional liaison. They hired analysts from Justice Department and State Department, built a team of 20 committed to the mission. Emma discovered she was pregnant in early January. She told Dominic in their war room at Pierce Estate, surrounded by the maps and files that had brought them together. "I am pregnant," she said without preamble. Dominic looked up from the intelligence brief he was reviewing. Shock, joy, fear, all cycling across his face in seconds. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified," Emma admitted, "and excited, and worried about timing. We just started the council work and—" Dominic crossed to her, took her hands, cut off her spiral. "We will figure it out," he said firmly. "Together, like everything else." Emma relaxed slightly. "Together." "Do you want to know something?" Dominic asked, a smile playing at his lips. "What? Mrs. Hayes is going to be insufferable. She has been waiting 30 years for children in this house." Emma laughed. "Then we should tell her soon before she guesses." Mrs. Hayes did guess, within a week. Started preparing nurseries before Emma was 3 months along. The Carter-Pierce Act passed Congress with overwhelming support. Named after Emma's maiden name at Thornton's insistence, It mandated transparency in political funding, strengthened whistleblower protections, and gave the Special Counsel Office constitutional authority to investigate corruption across all branches. Emma testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee at 4 months pregnant, her analytical brilliance on full display as she cited Madison Hamilton in modern case law to defend the legislation. "You are asking us to create a new power structure," Senator Collins said. "I am asking you to protect the power structure we already have," Emma corrected. "The Constitution envisioned checks and balances. The Carter-Pierce Act simply provides tools to enforce those checks when internal mechanisms fail." She paused, one hand resting on her barely visible baby bump. "We are building a legacy here, not for ourselves, for the generation coming after us. They deserve a government that works, that serves rather than exploits." The act passed 89-11. President Thornton signed it in a Rose Garden ceremony, Emma and Dominic standing beside him. "This represents the future," Thornton said. "Merit over money, competence over connections, justice for all." Marcus Whitfield requested a meeting through his attorney. Emma agreed, curious despite herself. They met at a neutral location, a government office. Sparrow sat in as witness. Marcus looked different, thinner, humbler. The polish of wealth stripped away by 6 months of house arrest and community service. "Thank you for seeing me," he said quietly. "What do you want, Marcus?" "To apologize. Properly. Not the public statement my attorney drafted, but real contrition." He met her eyes for the first time. "You were right about everything. I was a coward. I let my father control me through fear. I used your brilliance without acknowledging it. I threw you away when someone offered me money." "I know," Emma said simply. "I am working now with a nonprofit that helps domestic violence victims escape financial control. Because that is what my father did to me. What I did to you, financial abuse disguised as family obligation." He paused. "I cannot undo what I did, but I can help others escape what we both experienced. Powerlessness." Emma studied him, looking for manipulation, finding only exhaustion and genuine remorse. "Do not thank me," she said. "Thank yourself for finally choosing to change. Earn redemption through action, not words." "I will," Marcus said. "I promise." As he left, Emma felt something release. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. The ability to move forward without the weight of hatred. Isabel Marie Pierce was born at 3:47 a.m., 8 pounds 2 ounces. Dark hair like her father. Blue eyes that would eventually turn gray. Dominic held her with the careful reverence of someone who had never expected this joy. "She is perfect," he whispered. Emma, exhausted and radiant, smiled from the hospital bed. "She is ours." Mrs. Hayes arrived at the hospital within the hour, took one look at Isabel and burst into tears. 30 years, she said. 30 years this house has been silent. Now there is life." Emma returned to work part-time when Isabel was 3 months old. The Special Counsel Office had prosecuted 89 corruption cases, recovered $4.2 billion, reformed political funding across 12 states. But the work was far from over. On a cold December evening, Emma and Dominic sat in the war room, Isabel asleep in a bassinet nearby. "New case," Dominic said, sliding a file across the table. "Interior Department, illegal land sales, billions in environmental damage." Emma opened it, her analytical mind already connecting threads. "This links back to Sterling Holdings," she said after 10 minutes. "Victoria's family is still operating through shell companies." "Her trial is scheduled for March," Dominic said. "This evidence ensures conviction." Emma looked at their daughter sleeping peacefully. "We are building this for her," she said quietly. "A government that works, that she can trust." "We are building it together," Dominic corrected. "Partners, always." Victoria Sterling was convicted on all counts. 25 years federal prison. Marcus completed his community service, was offered the executive director position at the domestic violence nonprofit he had been volunteering with. He called Emma to tell her. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that the second chance you gave me mattered. We helped 200 families escape financial abuse this year." "Good," Emma said. "Keep helping. That is how you repay the debt." Senator Ashford was convicted, sentenced to 15 years. His family, protected by Emma's insistence on thorough investigation, received counseling and support services. The 7 political families that had attempted the coup lost everything. Wealth, power, influence. The Carter-Pierce Act worked exactly as designed. Emma discovered she was pregnant again. "How do you feel?" Dominic asked the same question as before. "Ready," Emma said. "We did this once. We can do it again." Theodore James Pierce was born in late September 2027, 6 weeks early but healthy. Blue eyes, Shock of dark hair. Isabel, now 2 years old, looked at her baby brother with the solemn assessment of a future judge. Baby, she declared. Yes, sweetheart, Emma said, laughing. This is Theodore, your brother. The Sunday afternoon sun poured through Pierce estate windows, turning dust motes into floating gold. Emma stood in the kitchen doorway watching Dominic make lunch while Isabel helped by arranging vegetables into elaborate patterns on the counter. Daddy, this one is a bunny, Isabel announced, holding up a carrot with green tops. That is an excellent bunny, Dominic said seriously. Very artistic. Theodore, 6 months old, sat in his high chair, making sounds that might eventually become words. Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. This ordinary Sunday. This was what she had been fighting for without knowing it. Come here, you, Dominic said, noticing her in the doorway. He pulled her into an embrace while still managing to stir pasta with one hand. What are you thinking? That 3 years ago I was invisible, Emma said, and now I am here. With you, with them, with work that matters. You were never invisible, Dominic corrected. They just refused to see you. There is a difference. Later that afternoon, while Isabel napped and Theodore played on a blanket, Marcus arrived for his quarterly visit. It had become tradition. Every 3 months, Marcus came to report on the nonprofit's progress, to maintain accountability, to remember what second chances cost. We helped 83 families this quarter, he said, sitting in the Pierce Estate Library. 32 obtained restraining orders against financially abusive partners. 51 secured independent bank accounts. 15 fled to safe housing. Good work, Emma said. I brought Isabel a gift, Marcus added, pulling out a children's book. About strong women who changed history. Wollstonecraft, Stanton, Angelou. Emma took it, studied the illustrations. She will love it. Thank you. As Marcus prepared to leave, he paused. I know I say this every time, but Emma, thank you for showing me that redemption is possible through action. That cowardice can be overcome. That, Marcus, Emma interrupted gently. You do not need to thank me anymore. Just keep doing the work. That is enough. He nodded, understanding. After he left, Dominic found Emma in the library. How do you feel after those visits? He asked. Peaceful, Emma said. He is becoming the person he should have been, and I am glad I could help that happen. But he is not part of my story anymore. Not really. Good, Dominic said. He pulled her close. Because your story is here. With me. With our children. With the work we are building. That evening, after the children were asleep, Emma and Dominic sat on the porch swing overlooking Pierce Estate grounds. The garden where Emma had first signed the contract was now a playground. Swings and sandbox replacing formal hedges. The war room still operated upstairs. 20 analysts working on cases that would reform government for generations. Any regrets? Dominic asked the same question he always asked on their anniversary. Only that I did not meet you sooner. Emma said the same answer she always gave. We met exactly when we needed to, Dominic replied. Two damaged people building something whole. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, watched stars appear above Virginia countryside. Tell me something, she said. If you could go back, change anything, would you? Dominic was quiet, considering. I would change the 30 years I spent alone, he said finally. The isolation that shaped me into someone who thought duty mattered more than connection. But I would not change the journey that led me to you. Good answer, Emma said, smiling. They sat in comfortable silence, the house behind them glowing with warm light. Mrs. Hayes visible through the kitchen window, preparing tomorrow's breakfast. Isabel's toys scattered across the living room. Theodore's bassinet near the fireplace. A life built. A legacy forming. Emma's phone buzzed. Message from Sparrow Newcase. Major banking fraud. Brief tomorrow. She typed back, 10 a.m. Bring coffee. Work never ended. Corruption was eternal. But so was the fight against it. Ready for tomorrow? Dominic asked, reading over her shoulder. Always, Emma said. We are partners, remember. Always, Dominic echoed. He pulled her close, kissed her temple, and together they watched nights settle over the estate. 3 years ago, Emma Sinclair had been invisible. Valueless, erased. Now she was Emma Pierce. Special counsel, mother, partner, the architect of reform that would outlast her lifetime. They said she was not enough. Wrong breeding, wrong background, wrong value. But she had something they could not measure. The courage to demand her worth. The intelligence to build something better. The strength to stand with someone who saw her completely. And a partner who chose her. Every single day. Inside the house, Isabel stirred in her sleep. Theodore made soft baby sounds. Mrs. Hayes hummed while cleaning. The work continued. The fight persisted. But they faced it together. Partners, equals, family, and that Emma thought as Dominic's arms tightened around her was the only legacy that truly mattered.